Welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you. The viewing and listening audience, literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Sebo, and I will be your host for the next hour. Welcome to the Donna Sebo television show. I'm so delighted you're able to join me today. We're going to be talking about the world of a fiction writer. Actually, we have two fiction writers with us today. And just to make you aware of my daily radio show, which is the Donna Sebo Show, as well as Warriors for Peace, that is done. The Donna Sebo Show is done daily, and Warriors for Peace is an exclusive that's done every Wednesday. And you can find out about those programs via DelphiInternational.com. We have two wonderful authors today. Both of these gentlemen are fiction writers. And what I like to do with my programming is to introduce, through my television shows, a couple of the writers that we have had. I've interviewed well over 10,000 people in my 23 years of broadcasting my programs. And you know what? Writing is so important, as is the reading of materials. But what is the world of a fiction writer like? Well, if you've wanted to do some writing on your own, by golly, we're going to give you some tips today. And I want to introduce you to Walter Stephen Geeding. And Walter, you are in Missouri.
I am.
My
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and look at the technology we're able to utilize to be able to bring you thousands of miles away right here into the studio. And it's a delight to finally meet you. You've been on my show, and it has always been wonderful. And now I get to see you in person.
Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Yes, it's a pleasure. And then also Matt Shea. And Matt is here in the Pacific Northwest. And so he is someone I've known for years. And both of these men are prodigious writers. They always are sitting and creating. And the world of fiction is so interesting. And Matt, you have just got so much information to share, as you do, Walter. Walter, what I want to ask you both a question. I'm going to give you the same question, actually, to get your feedback. You have this amazing imagination, Walter. You have this imagination that takes you into time zones that are different. You have put out all kinds of publications that deal with the world of fantasy, but yet at the same time, you integrate in these different time zones that are very much relative to today. What was it that started you on this road as a writer? Why did you decide to go into this phenomenal world of the fantastic?
Well, I've always been in love with the spoken and written word, and I started writing poetry at a very young age. I think 7. My mom said I wrote my first dark poem, and again, I always like to say how dark can a fat little 7-year-old be, but that started me out. Then, of course, I went through many years of law, but prior to that, I had my own experiences out on the road, and God, a lot of my experiences are more unbelievable than what I write. So I integrated my real life with my fiction, and that's what got me going.
Now, Matt, what started you? Because you just have you have such a special relationship with so many unique environments, and you bring them into the context of fiction, but really often it's dealing with everyday life. What started you?
It all started in early grade school when they were teaching us how to read and write. Jane, run, spot, jump, spot. Started back there. Our teacher, she told us that whenever we get an idea, it could be used for writing as well, or when something intrigues you. So at a young age, I would scrawl words that meant something to me. And sometimes it was a puzzle that through life I would figure it out later. And so throughout my life, I had such notes that when people would read it, well, what does this mean? It meant a lot to me. It's touching a nerve. It is pointing a direction. Then the day comes where it hits and, hey, I got a story out of this. So the day I was learning how to read and write, I was also preparing myself to write.
Now that's fascinating. Both of you have been engaged in writing for a good portion of your life, yet you were very inspired in your own way to do what you're doing today. And it's something that I feel so many people find the world of fiction fascinating, but there's a lot of work behind it. There is a lot of work and a lot of research that goes behind it. I know because I interview so many people a year, well over 300. Walter, you yourself, in your first, well, the first book that I became aware of was Coco Pelli. Coco Pelli. Now, I was intrigued with this because you told me, I remember when we were talking on the show, the radio show, you were telling me how a lot of this related to your own life, that you went through a number of adventures. When you're writing, you put a part of yourself into what's there. But how do you go about the research? I mean, the Coco Pelli, the beginning of that series, is all about the aspect of time travel, which is fascinating to so many people. But what got you started with that kind of a concept? How could you make that work?
The idea of time travel to me is very personal because I have a physical manifestation that's real called synesthesia. Synesthesia is something that literally puts you in a different place. For me, it was my time I spent up above Estes Park, Colorado, camping out under the wet pines. To this second, when I smell a wet pine, it throws me back to about 1971 above Estes Park. And I realized, and it's not a memory, you're physically there, or mentally there. And I realized that time is truly endless, which started my Endless Time series because we're at a spot on the continuum. Time has no beginning, it has no ending. We're just there. And that got me started on my time.
It's amazing because it's a story that relates to two men, and they have a legacy that they discover and that intrigues them to such a degree. They're young, and so often when we're young, we just don't pay attention to any rules. We'll just go ahead and do whatever we need to do. And that's a fascinating way to begin it. And then to have the vortex, the travel, to experience. I mean, people are fascinated with that. So with you, when you got into that, and you've got so much detail about different time frames, and you go into that detail, it had to have taken you a while to do all that research.
It truly did. The writing for me was one of the more simple parts of it because it comes so naturally. I've written since I can remember. But the research to make it realistic to where, anybody can turn around and go, so, well, by golly, William Becknell, he truly was there in 1822 New Mexico. And he was the first guy to come in. And to do that, to make it realistic, you've got to make your characters breathe. To make a character breathe, you've got to know what they did prior, you've got to know what they did after and during. And that kind of research is exhausting.
So with that particular series, and you've got more than one, you've got the Colony series. Of course, you've also got one that is a holiday book. It's When the Mice Gets Fat, or The Mouse Gets Fat, talking about a fat mouse, which is just adorable. We'll go into that in a bit. But with each of these, with the series that you did, because you have different time frames with the time travel, then you pick different dynamics of different time spectrums and merging them then what would be considered the today environment relative to the characters that you're writing about. So each book is so detailed. How long did it take you to do your research and to put the first one together?
Probably The Path of Coco Pelli, to write and research it probably took the better part of a year. And then they got a little easier after that, but because I knew what I wanted and what was going to be required of me internally to put something on the written page and make it believable.
Well, it's just a good bit of information to share because we have people that want to write and they're so intimidated and they're so afraid to do that. Matt, you have a different direction with your fiction writing. You have so many books. Now, how many books have you put out? Walter's put out a number. How many? You've come out even with a brand new one just recently.
We have, at present, I have a total of 15 ebooks that equates to 11 paperback.
Mm-hmm. And then the brand new one that's just come out too.
Well, that is number 11 paperback, and it stems from a suggestion you had given me, one warrior piece to another. I write fiction because it's a tribute to the common man, meaning man and woman. And when a person is contending with a dilemma in life, being misunderstood, deep inside, we can relate to that person because we've all walked a mile in those shoes. But the new one is about gambling because I've done a lot of research. It's my third book about gambling, but the first one that is nonfiction. And it's essentially what I've learned about the culture. I spent a year and a half surveying 6 different casinos in our area, and that is eavesdropping in the parking lot, talking to security, talking to maintenance, talking to people who were in management, listening to people in the coffee shops of the casinos that wanted to talk to someone. And then after doing that for a year and a half, I got in the saddle for a year off and on because I should do that as well if I'm going to write about it. And I truly lived the culture, and I was one of those who realized that these machines have a way to control you. The book that we had out recently named Pavlov is aptly named because we come to have expectations. We get conditions for the same reward system, and then something's wrong. And while you're digging in your wallet to get more money to get this machine to cooperate, the casino likes you being a patron.
Mm-hmm. Oh, big time. That's big time. Pavlov, yes, I remember our conversation about that and the different perspectives of what people go through in that fictitious format. And it's really quite an interesting read. And you've also put out a book about Elmo, but each and every one of them are distinctly different that you have done. And I can recall our conversation that we had before on the radio show where you were talking about you really liked the theme of the Andy Griffith show, the way that theme went through. And then your mom had a big impact on you as far as contributing to what it was that you have ended up doing, and that is writing and just going into all different types of formats of thought. It seems like you really want people to know that they have options.
We certainly do, and it all centers around small town USA and those who made those towns come alive. When a person is contending with a problem such as an Andy Griffith, we could all relate to it. And when it's all said and done, nobody's famous, rich or poor. It comes out to, well, thank goodness you are just the way you are. Don't change a bit. It's like Gilligan. You only tease the ones you love. The more you scoff and laugh at someone, the more you respect and actually love them. And so these people who are deemed too nice to get kicked, I like to write about them. Life gives them a funny turn, and they deal with it with their wholesomeness while they look up and pray. And then from there, nature takes its course. They follow that spiritual guidance. All my stories are about that.
Both of you have entered the world of fiction. Now, you've just begun to do something with nonfiction, but fiction has been so important to you. Walter, when you are in that demeanor, you're writing, you're in the zone. That's a popular term. It's being in the zone and having that no sense of time whatsoever, and you just let things flow through you. When you're in that zone, when you are writing, I wonder, do you ever have those blind spots of time where you feel like there's nothing coming through? I mean, have you experienced what's called often a writer's block?
That's a great question because I have not. I've often said that I put my finger and I write transcript. A lot of people type directly in, and but I lose in the translation if my fingers aren't writing. And I've often said I follow my fingers. I don't know what my characters are going to do 3 pages down the line. So as far as the writer's block, I simply sit there and Jim or Jack, when they take off, I'm waiting to see what's around the next corner, just like the reader.
You're waiting to see what's around the next corner, what they've got to tell you, huh? That has happened so many times with authors that I've talked with. They will say that they have a character and it will come to life in a way that they never expected. Sometimes that character wakes them up in the middle of the night and says, "Excuse me, but it's time to pay attention." And has that happened with you, where you're maybe fixing yourself a hard-boiled egg and a cup of coffee for something as a snack, and the next thing you know, one of your characters comes into your mind? Does that happen to you every once in a while?
Absolutely. I've got a little barn down, I live on a farm, but I've got a little shed, and I've got my weight room set up down there, and I'll be down there. I usually work out really early before breakfast, and I'll be down there lifting iron, just being crazy, man. And all of a sudden something will come to me, and I've got one whole wall. My wall's been painted white, and I keep a pencil down there. I've got one whole wall that is entirely covered with scribbles that, oh, they're going to do this today, or they're going to do that tomorrow. And I've got, here's a paragraph here, 4 feet away is another paragraph. And then a book down the line, I tried to go back and figure out what happened to them. But it's really exciting. It's all over the place.
Yes, I would imagine. I can just imagine somebody listening to this, and if it were a psychiatrist, they say, "I think you need to visit, a mental institution," because this is not logical. This is not logical. Now, Matt, has that happened to you, where you've
yes.
had characters come to life and then tell you what you needed to write?
Each and every one of them does. I know what my objective is and where it starts, and then the character comes out to tell me which path we're going to take. In regards to writer's block, at all times I'm working on 30 or 40 different stories.
Oh, for
And
heaven's
some
sakes.
days I have more for this one, or I draw a blank, and all of a sudden I look at another one, and yeah, I've got quite a bit to work here. My first book that I started working on was The King of Coleman's Hill, and I made it halfway down the first page, and then something hit me because I knew what I wanted to write, but then I did The Groundskeeper that had 20 stories to it, and then I did 3 more, and then I would write a little bit more on The King of Coleman's Hill, and then I would stop after half a chapter. And finally, the day came where I got to see more of Small Town USA, so I did some long-haul trucking with a friend. I was covering the country about 5 weeks or so, and then it hit me hard one night, and so I came back home and I finished up that book in 3 months. But it took me several years to get the first one actually done because of that proverbial writer block. That happens to me, but I never know what's going to happen. I know what the objective is and where we start, and those characters are going to tell me. And about characters, I usually write late at night. There's something about when the stars are out, oh, it's raining, and it's just me and the Lord above me, and the whole earth is quiet. I'll start to cry. It's coming out. But when those tears are coming, I'm in writing mode. I will go several hours and I'll look and see, my gosh, it's sunrise. But that is my writing stretch when I'm writing.
It's so fascinating to know what somebody goes through, because everybody's unique in the way that I'll call it that channeling of information and that character identification. And I can identify with it because I'm an author of children's books. And in doing the stories for the children, I describe it as a download. So when you're talking about your synesthesia, Walter, and you're talking about all of that, then I go, so much of this that we're discussing relates to that intuitive flow that we can experience that is just magical when you allow it just to be. And the characters do develop in their own way. And they can be rather bossy at times too. So, you have to determine how you're going to work with that. But it really is fascinating to hear both of you express how it works for you. You've got a wall that you write on. I just think that's marvelous. Maybe somebody has their own special space and they can go out and buy, what is it, that chalk paint that they could put up on a section of wall or on the back of a door. So when inspiration comes, they can go in, they can scribble, they can do whatever they want to do. I think that's a marvelous idea. Of course, you'd have to get approval of whoever's in the household with you, wherever you got your writing. They may not appreciate it, but it is something that, we each have to find our own way, don't we? For me, it's a
That is
kitchen table. We each, it's just we each have to find our own way. So, with someone that is watching this and they're aspiring to be a writer, now maybe they've gotten some recognition in one way or another. We have people of all ages that watch the programming. So, if you were talking to a young person and you had a group of young people in front of you, or let's just say a diversified audience of age groups, what would you want them to know? Walter, what would you want them to know so that they would be comfortable with their creativity and realize that doing the writing is something it's a wonderful thing. They shouldn't be intimidated by it or even afraid of it. What would you say to them?
if I was going to be talking to a bunch of kids that were starting out writing, or anybody, you're all a child when you start writing. You're learning from 0 to 60. But don't be scared to pick up that pencil or get that key. Start somewhere, because the true wrongness is never starting. I always say no guts, no glory. That's been my motto for my life. Many years out on the road, if you don't take that first step, you get left behind. The world will leave you in its dust. So take that first step. If you do it wrong, there's always an eraser or a key that puts you back to the start. You can do it again, but you've got a thought out there. Put that thought down and take another step.
All right. And Matt, what would you say?
I would safely guard your writings at the beginning, because loved ones think they have you figured out, but it's within their world, their taste. And a lot of people are demoralized by family when the rest of the world would like to see what you have to write about. And so
that's a
you
good
have
point.
to hold it close to yourself, not tip your hand, so to say. And there are writers' clubs out there. There are editors and so forth that will gladly look at that and give you constructive criticism. But there seems to be a nature with family where your pecking order is, and the younger you are, the more discouraged they might do it, even though they thought they meant well. So it's the household. Don't let it get the better of you, but always accept the encouragement.
Well, I think of the Little House on the Prairie series. That was based on Laura Ingalls and that character, but she started writing when she was very, very young. But I have interviewed people just recently, a woman who is 89 years old, writing her very first book. Now, hers was a nonfiction book, but she'd had so many people say, write, and just what you've said, the aspect of write, don't worry about it, just write it out. And if you do journals, you never know, you might end up going back into those journals and pulling out bits and pieces of history and information and personal experience that you can add into your own stories. So saving those writings, I think, is a very, very good suggestion. You did that yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, and that to me is really something, these little tips that we're giving are just so important, because you begin somewhere. Now, we live in a time frame where we have publications coming out by the thousands every single year. I think that there was, at one point, I remember hearing 100,000 publications a year. But it's not just through publishing houses. It used to be, I guess you'd call them the good old days, you had to find an agent, you had to find a publishing house. People are self-publishing today. And there is an issue of being able to find a publisher. So, Walter, I'd love for you to share what it is that you have learned and what you would recommend for people to consider. Would it be good to start out with self-publishing, dealing with Amazon.com, what would you say? Because you have had so many years of experience with writing. Both of you have, you and Matt as well. You've had so many years of experience with writing. The publishing environment is so different today. What would you recommend?
I started out, as a matter of fact, I'm still self-published
Ah,
because I probably put, I don't know, 200 query letters out to different publishers, and to the person, they won't admit it. But when they have somebody that's making them money, guess who they're going to go with first? They are very reluctant to take a chance on a new writer.
mm-hmm.
So I self-published, even though I got good reviews from review houses and stuff. And I've just continued doing that, and then I'll keep hitting up the publishing houses. One day somebody might take it, maybe not, but I'm not going to quit because of that.
Mm-hmm. So you just say self-publishing for you was very significant. Now, Matt, you have a publisher that you work with. So how did you find that publisher? What would you want people to know? Because there's also the aspect of self-publishing.
A friend of mine who is well published, he told me to get on the internet and look up a site called Writer Beware, because they have the top 10 lists of what they recommend and what they recommend for you to avoid. And also guru.com, which brings forth editors and so forth. So I did one of each. And Bobby had a virtual bookworm, made a quick contact. He looked at my stuff. And he said, I want to sign you. And so it went fine. And very often he would not accept any money until after my book was on the market, after that first royalty check. We're buddies for life. And one day he got in touch and he goes, Matt, do you want to know why I signed you? I go, please. He said, you write about people who are running full capacity, even though they might have less to work with. He says, you have a lot of compassion for people who are, what's politically correct, mentally challenged, something like that. He says, I have a child who's autistic and she loves your writings, and that is why I signed you. And that's what opened the door for me.
So it was through guru.com, and what was the other site?
Guru.com and a list called Writer Beware.
Writer Beware.
But it gives good lists and bad lists, and Virtual Bookworm was almost near the top for what I was submitting, my short stories and so forth. And so it is out there, and self-publishing does happen, but the catch is, regardless of the money up front, that is their name being put on it. And they're still going to study and go through the whole book because they don't want a complete stranger tarnish them. You have to cross that line where you're to the good, you have values that are understood, and then from there it happens. Again, Bobby and I have just completed number 11.
So there we've got the positioning on publishing and self-publishing. And again, having done children's books, I know they used to have big book shows that you could go to where you'd be one-on-one talking with people. It was a whole different environment. And now there is so much that's online doing the editing. How do you go about finding an editor? Walter, who does your editing on your publications?
I'm extremely fortunate after practicing law for 20 years. My paralegal is probably about as accomplished as any editor I've ever seen. She does my editing and has for many years, and she'll get it done, pass it to me. I'll go back over it, pass it to her, and about six edits down the line, we'll agree that it's ready.
It's ready to go. It's ready to go. Matt, what about editing? I mean, that is something that is extraordinarily important.
Yes, it is. Don Carter is a famous editor, and he was the first one I used. And his business was called Carter Writes, and he says that ever since he was 8 years old, he was involved with writing. He and his wife, both sides of the family. And he said with editing, an editor could edit every paragraph. He could take the #1 New York bestseller and still edit it over and over again. You're chasing your tail. What I do is I have a few trusted friends where they will read my manuscript, and then Bobby will read it, the publisher, And then when we decide we're going to make a go of it, Bobby sends it to an editor, or he himself will edit it. And then it comes back to be pretty much the same format that Walter's using. And then after it goes around 3 times, we fine tune it one more time and okay, it's a go, let's get it out there.
It's so important to do the editing because when you're writing, I know this is what I have found. It's so easy to have a typo, or when you're reading, if you already know the material, then your mind, your brain already knows the basics, and so you won't see what someone that has never looked at it before will see. And that is critical. That is so critical. And I've had more than one experience with that. And I'll say, I didn't see that. I just read it, 25 times. They say, no, you can't, but it's because of the way the brain works. So I have had materials, I know with my programming, I've had materials submitted to me at times where people have not taken that step of having someone editing their material. And that is important because it ends up looking sloppy. It doesn't end up looking the way it should. And it should, maybe sometimes your English isn't appropriate, or you're using a wrong term and maybe there's a better word to use than what you have in a certain section. So it's really good to do that editing. And then we're looking at the other side. We are looking at marketing. How we just enjoy marketing. That is something that I don't know of anyone that gets excited about doing that because it is a lot of work. We have to promote ourselves when we're writers. And in today's world, it's so different than before. There used to be people that would schedule book shows and, going into bookstores and doing signings. Hardly anybody is doing any of that anymore. And a lot of that was literally tossed out the door because of COVID, because of that period of time. So now there's a whole different world out there. Walter, how do you promote your material?
Pretty much like you said, going to book shows. I blog on a weekly or more basis. I put sections of my book on my blog and then write a paragraph underneath it where what I've done in the book is, in general, what I'm putting in my blog, and I find that works pretty good.
So do you do very much traveling? Do you go around to libraries? What do you do?
No, I sit right here. I mean, the world is so huge anymore that you can pretty well travel worldwide from your chair. You just got to know where.
That is something that should be encouraging to a lot of people to know that. Well, you've been on my radio shows, and Matt, it's the same with you because podcasts are really huge. So you have thousands and thousands of people that are doing podcasts. Some do just one every 6 months. Some do it, once a month, twice a month. They're not like me necessarily, where I do 6 shows a week featuring people from all over the world. So, Matt, with you, with the promotion, you're here in the Pacific Northwest. So what have you found that is very, very good for promotion?
What has worked for me is I've always loved doing radio shows and podcasts. And for example, I'm a history buff and also a trivia buff. And so I'll be asked to get on a show to cover where the Christmas displays are for the family, or where fun campgrounds are, or where the oldest running hotel in the state of Washington is. And so people get to know you through radio shows. And then, by the way, I have a website and I have some books. Well, now they're interested, if they're interested in you, because you were giving a topic that interested them. And so I don't put the book out in front of them. We have a common ground with the topic, and as I want to know more about them, through my website, they can know more about me.
Now that's very important. Walter, you have a website, and all of your books are on display. And that is the Copatelli, book, Cocopelli, excuse me, I mispronounced it. You have got the 2 books with that. You have Murphy's Diggins, and then you have the series Colony. That's book 1, The End, book 2, Narrations of Nui, and book 3, The Beginning. And Even the Mice Get Fat. That is the one special that you've done, which is just hysterical. It's really fun. And then you, Matt, you have so many books, and again, you've mentioned, and we're going to be able to show people the covers of the books that you both have put out. But you have what we've got on the table here is the Meadowdale Community Project, Elmo, The King of Coleman's Hill, which you mentioned earlier, Laura Town, and other short stories. Of course, we're not able to put all of your books out, Matt, and I'm not able to put all of yours out, Walter. But this gives people an idea. You know, your covers are very, very unique, and they relate very strongly to your topics. Now, the colony, Walter, that you have put together, when you were doing this, I was surprised at how it was associated with modern day. But then you've got a Queen Z that comes in. You've got all of these unique characters, and each and every one of your books in the series portrays, again, we'll go with time travel. It goes into an aspect that is very, very unique. But a nuclear war is an aspect of the book. And those are, you know, it's the colony. You have The End is the title of the first one. And the second one has to do with the narrations of New. And then you've got for book number 3, The Beginning. And it's, you know, it's intriguing how you have chosen those titles and then the content that you have in there. So, was there an agenda with the nuclear situation that you wanted to address?
There was. Colony is centered around bees, whether it be the guardians who end up being an exaggerated form of a bee inside. But I raised bees, and I had a hive disappear, and I started free associating and thought, you know, what happens to the world if the bees all disappear? And they were. You know, we've had hive collapses everywhere. And there's a famous Chinese sage that said, when the last bee's wings stop fluttering, Earth will cease as we know, as man knows it. And it's exactly true, because 50% or better of the world's commercial crops are pollinated by bees, and about 90% of the wild crops. We're the world's breadbasket, and if the breadbasket dries up, and the world, the food dries up when the bees disappear, the world will starve. Starving man, the belly knows no boundaries, and they will cross boundaries to get food. That will create wars between the country, and eventually there'll be somebody will get crazy enough to set off the big bomb. That's the theory of my books, and then I just went from there. The last book, and the end is created from that thought. What happens when the bees disappear? Well, the end happens. The narration of Nui is when the main character goes back in time to meet his ancient grandfather to decide how to save current Earth after First World floods. And the beginning is, does evil triumph and mankind cease to exist? Or is there a new beginning for man to come out on a fresh, clean Earth?
Well, I think you presented in a very intriguing way. So, when someone is in this process and you're going through these variables, this is something that can be very intriguing to someone because you're trying to get a message across. This is what I find in so much fiction. It is wanting to get a message across in whatever you write. You want people to be able to think about what's going on here. You've got all of these different characters, but you want them to be aware, just like you've said, the bee population has been in danger and is continuing to be in danger. People like yourself that have hives, Walter, that's wonderful because that is creating a benefit. But there are so many things that are coming to the forefront today that people of all generations are realizing we cannot just assume that things are going to work out. We have to be mindful. Now, you, Matt, with your stories of small town America, the different people, and with your different books, you know, it's the Meadowdale Community Project. This is about a community that really is going through some pretty tough times. And we have that happening right now with people. So this is something that enables problem solving. This is what you're bringing out in this book. Am I correct in how I perceive it?
Yes, Donna, the message in the Meadowdale Community Project is that people are also recyclable. We will recycle aluminum, glass, and other materials, but there's also people. And so often we will have these recycle dumpsters where people who are handicapped or whatever, less fortunate, that is their menial job. They're helping, but it's kind of on the outskirts of town. It's behind an old supermarket. Those people are valuable, just like the materials. So what they did was they started making animal feeders out of the recyclable goods that were arriving on the property. They got creative. Well, they invented the new hula hoop. People would see these outrageous animal feeders, and my gosh, hey, isn't that something we gave Dad for Christmas years ago? It could be a toy or something somebody threw out. Hey, I had that as a kid. It now became something. It's feeding animals. I want them back. Where people would then seek these people out and bring in materials. Could you make something for us? But it all evolved around feeding the forgotten animals, the pigeons, the squirrels out there, the chipmunks, and people who are overlooked because they're so quiet and they're going 100% capacity, trying, giving, not being a parasite off of society, being so reliable that they're forgotten. So it all comes together. We're all recyclable people serving as an example. That's what the Meadowdale book is all about.
Well, you know, I really like the term of recycling people. Now, that doesn't mean they go into a trash bin. It means that they are made aware that they have options. And I think both of you, in your writings, in your fiction, you bring a lot of that. How can we think differently? What can we do differently? How can we recycle ourselves, reframe what we take for granted? What can we do? And I think that that belongs to people of all ages. We're hearing stories about young people that are very, very depressed, and I think, what are you supposed to be somewhat depressed about, for heaven's sakes? You're just beginning life. Why are you depressed? Well, they don't feel like they have value. And I think when you have the ability to write and you're able to communicate with people, it makes all the difference in the world, because you are contributing something. You are giving something. You do have value. And I think fiction, whether it's historical or, you know, whatever genre you choose to be a part of. I mean, look at the television shows that are being written by people. I mean, the bakery detective or this person or that person, they choose a theme. And it's writing that brings all of that together. And that's why writing is so very, very important. Now, Walter, with your books, I know that they can find them on your website. And I know, Matt, people can find it. We'll give out that information. And that's something people need to know, that at the end of this program, in the credits, your contact information is going to be there. So they can be in touch with you. They can find out more about what you do. But how is it when it comes to the financial side? So many times I hear people saying, I did this publication, I have done this, and nobody is buying it. No, I'm not making any money off of it. I just don't want to do it. Neither one of you are all that concerned about money, are you, with it? Am I wrong, Walter?
No, I never started writing for the money. I started writing for the love of the word. Do I want to make money? Absolutely. I think I'd be lying to your face if I said I wouldn't take the money if it came in, and when it came in. But you know, it's the love and pride of seeing something that I created from my heart and mind there on paper, and to have somebody at the end of the day say, "Wow, that's original." That totally does it for me. That's worth more than any money you can put in your pocket.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, how do you feel about that?
exactly what Walter said. When I wrote the Meadowdale book, these people who were seen lower class, mentally disabled, physically disabled, we had a reversal. They became the town celebrities. They achieved status, what they really were. They made everybody happy. When I get a royalty check, I take friends out to dinner. It's a Thanksgiving. But it has nothing to do with look at this book. It's look at us, thank you, Lord, that type of thing. Money's irrelevant. If a person is trying to make money, I wouldn't do it through arts. You touch people one way or another, but you can't play God with that.
I found so often it's very, very satisfying when you know that your story has touched someone in a special way. That, I think, when they communicate that, it's worth every ounce of effort. And when you combine it with art, which both of you do in your covers, Coco Pelli, you have this wonderful illustration on the front of your book, Walter, that is representing the Native American. It is just, it's just lovely. And Matt, you, with each of your books, every cover is different, and it has some kind of relationship to the story. And I know with my children's books, the children love the illustrations. There's that other aspect. It's what I call the imagination combined with the art. And with the writing, you get lost in the stories, no matter what format you choose. When someone says, I was so engrossed in your material, I didn't want to put it down, that's a huge statement. How do you feel about that, Walter?
That tickles me no end. You know, in fact, I was working with my handyman like yesterday, the day before, and he was talking about the Colony book, and he said, you know, I picked it up, and once they started reading, he calls me Steve. But he said, Steve, once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down, so I'd be between a job, or I'd be waiting for the gas to fill up the truck, and I'd be reading a few pages, and next thing I know, people's honking at me. You know how good that makes your heart feel.
It does. Matt, how do you feel if someone says that to you?
I've had people tell me that. It felt wonderful. And one week, somebody from Kelso, Washington wrote me, and there was one in particular book I wrote, a real obscure one, and a story from a 20-story book. And she said of all of them, that was her favorite. But somebody had written me within a month saying, I like all of them, but that one, I'm not, it was the same story. So opposite ends of the spectrum, but this one person liked all but one. The other liked all of them, especially that one.
So it really, for someone watching us, you know, watching this program, I think what we've wanted to share is take pride in the fact that you can be creative and you can do something that is just, it's original. It's your story. It is something that somewhere, someone might be interested in, that make a difference in their thinking and in their life. And that's significant. I had an 8-year-old girl, after reading my children's book, The Magic Hat, she came back because she took the book home, and the next day she came back and she wanted to know where she could find the particular town that I had written about in the book. She said, I want to go see that museum, because there was a museum mentioned. And it took my breath away in a moment, because it was this child actually read, and it engaged her so much that she said, I want to know where it is so I can tell my parents they've got to take me there. I want to see the museum. And it was all my imagination. And that's what each of you have done. And if someone wants to write about space travel or anything else, I think of Rowling with Harry Potter. And she was writing in a coffee shop. And by golly, one day somebody reads it, and the movies that were made about it were absolutely amazing. The movies, I thought, were just phenomenally well done. But here's someone that was just writing to write, and these characters were alive for her, just as the characters are that you've written about are alive for you. And this is something that, if luck has it, where that story is going to be picked up by somebody and they say, I really would love to make a series out of it, or we'll do this, or I want you to do a reading at my book club. All of these things they're so special. They're so special. Now, I'd like each of you to give out your website information so that people know how to contact you. And Walter, what is your website?
WalterStephenGeeding.com. Stephen with a PH.
Stephen
And,
with a PH. And Geeding is Geeding.
correct.
And that's where they'll find it. So it's your name that is your website.
Yes.
There you go. And Matt, what is your website?
MattSheaBooks.net, Shea, S-H-E-A.
And Matt is with two T's,
Yes.
Mattshea. You know, when we've only got a few minutes before we're going to be sort of finishing up our program here, is there something special, Walter, that you would like anybody that is viewing this to know? What would you want them to know?
The most valuable treasure that you can possibly own is your dreams and your hopes. You can never have somebody steal that. They can steal everything else around you, but they can't steal those two things. Never give it up.
Never give it up. Didn't Winston Churchill make a statement like that? Never, ever, ever give up. So I agree with that. Matt, what would you want a viewer, listener to know about?
I agree with what Walter just pointed out. When a person has a desire to write, they were born to write. It's a gift. There's a spiritual convulsion. So right there, continue to write for the rest of your life. But my gosh, loved ones might degrade what you did because they don't see you as a greatness in the making. They're degrading your weak side, and you have to get around that. Let them encourage you, but get out there. Don't deal with the waves on the shoreline. Get out there in the ocean, and my gosh, you're going to meet a lot of people who can relate to you.
You know, those words really resonate with me because I remember many years ago sharing stories with people and writing, and what occurred is my significant other thought what I was doing was very stupid. And those were the words. This is stupid. Why would anybody want to read this? And what we have to understand is, depending on what a person thinks, and I ended up being able to produce, and I'm looking forward to producing more, but what I could see, he could not see. And when I came out with the first one, he said, this is magnificent. But he could not see what I was seeing. Just like you, Walter, with the time travel. Most people are not going to be able to see what you have put together until they read. And that's why reading is so important. And that's why I support literacy to the degree that I do. And I support authors because it's through that that we grow and we become more aware of the world and different people's thinking. And I think that's so important. And Matt, it's the same thing with you, with the materials that you have shared with me. And so much of this needs to be encouraged, the creativity of anyone in the written word, in the artistic modem. It just absolutely, that creative element, when you produce it, that is your creation. And I think both of you have addressed that very, very well. I want to thank both of you for being my guests, and repeat your websites, please, so that people know how they can reach you.
WalterStephenGeeding.com.
Yes, and that's Stephen with a P, and Geeding is Geeding, and Matt, yours too.
MattSheaBooks.net.
MattSheaBooks.net, Matt with two T's, and Shea is S-H-E-A. I want to thank both of you for being my guests today. It's been a pleasure having you. And thank you for sharing your perspectives. This is Donna Sebo, and before I say goodbye, I wanted to reiterate something that we have shared with you today, and that is, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done in life, you have a story to tell. And when you can tell that story, well, you're going to be maybe quite surprised at how important it is for other people. I'm going to thank you so much for being with me. I encourage you to find out more about my own radio show. My radio program is The Donna Sebo Show. It is on the Donna Sebo Show Network. And Warriors for Peace, which is a very different format of programming, is available as well. So I'm so grateful that we've had this time together, and I really look forward to the next time we have a chance to chat with you and bring with you or bring to you more authors and their very special gifts and talents. Thank you for being with me. Bye for now.
You have been listening to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Sebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.